Assalamu alaikum dear aspirants. Welcome back to another insightful lecture on governance and public policy for CSS 2026. Today we will explore a highly significant yet often debated topic, the role of international donors, especially the IMF in shaping Pakistan economic policy framework. And we will particularly focus on the IMF Memorandum of Economic and Financial Policies MEFP during 2013-14 to 15-16 period. So this document not only guided Pakistan's macroeconomic reform agenda but also outlined specific conditions attached to IMF financial support, from fiscal consolidations and subsidy rationalization to energy reforms and structural changes. The MEFP had a deep impact on public policy. So we will examine how donor-driven policy frameworks are formulated, implemented, and contested, and discuss both their benefits and their challenges, especially in the context of national sovereignty and social impact. So as always, PDF notes and an MCQs Google form are linked in the description to help you consolidate your learning. Let's begin. International donors, particularly the IMF, International Monetary Fund, have significant influence on economic policies of developing countries like Pakistan. So when Pakistan needs financial assistance, the IMF provides a document known as MEFP, mean Memorandum of Economic and Financial Policies. For example, in 2013, Pakistan was facing an economic crisis with declining foreign exchange reserves. So during this time, Pakistan took a loan from the IMF, which came with certain policy reform conditions listed in the MEFP. Next, we will discuss IMF MEFP overview, economic program, fiscal focus, policy guide. So this period marks the time when Pakistan entered into an agreement with the IMF under the extended fund facility, and the focus was on three main areas: fiscal consolidation, structural reforms, and third is financial sector stabilization. For example, the policy includes steps such as expanding the tax net, reducing the budget deficit, and enhancing the autonomy of the State Bank of Pakistan. So, donors influence mechanism, role of IMF and donors in policy making. International donors not only provide financial aid but also impose conditions for policy reform. So, their involvement often compels governments to adopt specific economic directions. For example, if the IMF provides a loan, it may require conditions such as reducing subsidies or increasing taxes to decrease the fiscal deficit. So these conditions influence budgetary priorities. So what was the primary objective of the IMF MEFP? So aspirants think about this. When Pakistan signed the IMF Memorandum of Economic and Financial Policies, what do you think was the core objective behind it? Why would the IMF ask a country to commit to detailed policy document before disbursing any loan? If you are watching this as part of your CSS preparation, make sure you are just not listening. Start thinking like a policy maker. These are the exact kind of analytical questions you will face in the exam. Comment below if you know the answers. Was it about fiscal reforms, governance, or just loan repayment? And which reform in the energy sector was part of the IMF conditions? Now, let's talk about one of the most critical sectors, energy. During that 2013-16 IMF program, which energy sector reform do you think was included as a major condition? And it was directly related to electricity prices and circular debt. So drop your answers in the comments. I will discuss it shortly. Now we will discuss sectors impacted by these policies. Fiscal policy, increase in GST, income tax reforms, reduction in energy subsidies, and then monetary policy, inflation targeting and exchange rate management, change in interest rates to control inflation, currency devaluations or free float exchange rate. Then financial sector, legal changes to improve banking supervision, greater autonomy to the State Bank, and energy sector, gradual increase in electricity prices, reforms to reduce circular debt. For example, in 2014, electricity prices were gradually increased as a condition by the IMF to address circular debt. So next we will discuss impact on Pakistan public policy alignment. Almost all major economic policies reference MEFP goals. Then conditional implementation policy reflect IMF conditions for financial aid, and structural changes led to new tax law, energy sector restricting and austerity measures, and economic disciplines improved fiscal discipline and macroeconomic indicators during the period. So most of the Pakistan economic policies were aligned with the targets set in the IMF MEFP. For example, tax laws were amended in 2014. Major reforms were introduced in the energy sector, and austerity measures were adopted, such as cuts in government spending. So improvements were observed in economic indicators such as current account balance and inflation rate. Next, we will discuss criticism and challenges. So loss of sovereignty, implementations of IMF conditions can affect national policy autonomy. And second criticism is social impact, removal of subsidies increase the burden on the poor. Then implementation delays, political resistance or bureaucratic inefficiencies, delay reforms, and dependency, continuous reliance on aid discourages self-sufficiency. For example, when energy prices were increased under IMF conditions, the common people faced inflation and triggering public black cash. So next, we will discuss reforms and strike a balance between national interest and donor conditions, promote transparency and public awareness about reforms, and increase domestic resource mobilization to reduce reliance on external borrowing, and design policies that not only ensure economic growth but also reduce poverty. For example, revenue can be increased through reforms in the agriculture and industrial sectors, reducing the need for external loans. So the IMF and the other international donors play a major role in shaping Pakistan policies, especially during financial crises. Documents like MEFP become central to Pakistan's public policy framework. It is now up to Pakistan to engage with donors wisely, design its own policies, and ensure social protection is not compromised. Do you think removing subsidies affects the poor? Here's a thought-provoking question for you all. When governments remove subsidies under IMF pressure, do you think it helps the economy or hurts the poor? Type yes if you believe it affects the poor the most, and no if you think it's necessary for long-term stability. I will explain both sides shortly, so stay tuned. And if you are watching this as part of your CSS preparation, make sure you are not just listening. Start thinking like a policymaker. These are the exact kind of analytical questions you will face in the exam. So in conclusion, international donors, most notably the IMF, have played a central role in shaping Pakistan's economic trajectory, particularly through frameworks like the IMF MEFP, while such documents provide structured pathways for economic stabilization and reform. So there are also important questions about policy autonomy, social equity, and long-term sustainability. So as CSS aspirants, it is vital to understand how external financing mechanism influence internal governance structures and decision-making process. So moving forward, Pakistan must aim to balance international commitments with its own development goals, enhance domestic resource mobilization, and design inclusive policies that protect the most vulnerable segments of society. So I hope this lecture gave you clarity on topic. Don't forget to go through the attached PDF notes and test your understanding through the MCQs Google form link below. Keep preparing smartly.